Transportation Plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is to follow up on last month's meeting number 1 that we had for the Long Range Transportation Plan. As we discussed last month, the first step of the LRTP updating is the visioning phase to review the vision goals and existing conditions. This May 22nd meeting number 2, is to be used for continuing the discussion on the vision and goals. And just to let you know, the staff, as you probably already know, staff has launched a visioning survey to help inform this process. I'll talk about that in a minute. I'll talk about it now. Survey results will be presented at the next meeting on June 26th, and the NPDC will be asked to approve the vision and goals at that meeting before beginning a prioritization of strategies and projects. And just to build on the outreach that's being done to date, as you know, the NPDC is seeking input from the public using the town's Zen City online public outreach platform. The image on the right is an image of that site. It's currently being used for collection of vision survey responses, and also offers a timeline of the process, recorded presentations describing the long range transportation plan. It will have future recordings for the public to access at their convenience and make comments on those presentations within this site. Soon it could have a commenting map to collect locations of congestion, safety, and other current issues. The current NPDC vision for transportation, as you know, was approved in June of 2019, and that's shown here at the top in black, which is to equitably and legally limit vehicles on Nantucket while providing a transportation system that is safe, accessible for all users, economical, and sensitive to the character of the island. And as we presented at last month's meeting number 1, perhaps a more succinct way of saying the same thing is shown here in red and describes what the system could be or what we envision the system to be in 2050, which is a safe, accessible, and economical transportation system with vehicle limitations that is sensitive to the character of the island. This is now out for public input through the visioning survey. And to continue your discussion of the vision and the goals, staff's provided 2 options for organizing goals and objectives for NPDC's consideration. Both strive to simplify and reorganize the goals to align with priorities and desired outcomes. As presented last month, this option shown here shows the 9 current goals or mechanisms on the left. These have been modified based on the arrows to be more succinct, and these suggested goals explicitly align with federal planning factors. Starting at the top of the suggested goals, this goal suggests prioritizing reliability to, from, and around the island. Next is ensuring equitable investment through outreach with prioritized investment in all modes within the town overlay. Then strengthening the economy through reliable freight movement, connected paths, frequent transit operations, and turnover of on-street parking downtown. Next, investments that contribute to a resilient system in a state of good repair. And then achieve a 0 fatalities by 2050. Then lastly, minimizing impacts to the natural and cultural environment. And just for comparative purposes, to provide another option, this second option explicitly aligns with the current vision and with planning priorities that align with each of those goals. This option is much more succinct. New priorities are included in red and represent priorities that are not in the current long-range transportation plan. Those, as you can see, are the Safe Streets and Roads for All action plan, and reduced fares or free fares for public transportation, options for affordable free parking downtown in the airport, and prioritizing projects that contribute to resiliency and reliability related to a future Protect grant, and that's a resiliency grant using federal funds. So, Madam Chair, I'll stop there before going into the actual transportation assets and see if there's any commentary on which particular way of framing the vision, goals, and priorities that's preferred by this commission, whether you like the more example that was presented last month that are strive to reorganize or modify the goals based on federal performance measures as the primary focus, or organize the goals and priorities based more explicitly with the vision that you've approved.
Thank you, Mike. Is there any impact in either way of proceeding on the availability of federal funds? You mentioned the first way aligns with federal language, and I wasn't sure if we were drifting from eligibility if we did not use that system.
I'll say, and I'll ask Raisha to correct me if I'm talking out of school, that no, it would not. It would just be more effort put into describing how our region's transportation plan does align with federal planning factors. By taking them out and making them explicit in your goals, that lift is relatively easy. Strengthening regional economic competitiveness, that is a federal planning factor. If you adopted it as your goal, then there's little explanation that's needed. Going the other route of strengthening the regional economic competitiveness, this does provide a goal of economics in there. The third row down, we would need to be a little bit more explicit with whether that's intended to keep the region competitive economically. So I would say it's just an effort in writing the plan and describing it for Mass DOT's review. Raish, does that sound generally correct?
Yes, that's correct. So the visions and goals that you select are a form of guidance. However, they do not have an impact on the federal funding of these projects, and the projects you select will be the ones that will eventually receive federal funding if they're in the LRTP, because this sets a precedent.
Thank you, Raisa. John Trudell, you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, if I may, to Mike. Mike, I guess obviously when we're looking at transportation and the transportation system, we have to look at everything as a whole. That being said, motorized vehicles, mopeds, things like that for vehicle restrictions and discussions that we've had not only in the past but just recently at town meeting. How do those type of vehicles factor into the for the statistics as far as zero fatalities by 2020, looking at where we're going with those different vehicles, alternative vehicles? Are we generally looking at stats right now for conventional vehicles like buses and trucks and cars, or are we factoring all those alternative vehicles as well?
And this is to deal with the Vision Zero or the zero fatalities. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. All in all, in general, but yes, that's one of the questions with the statistics. I was just, when it says regulate the number of vehicles, how we want to try and shoot for a goal of zero fatalities. In general, those goals, how do they play out with the alternative vehicles that we're looking into now, or that are actually on the roads and bike paths and things?
Honestly, with the vehicle limitations goal, I think that's probably a subject of discussion to see if that's something you want to limit, go beyond that conventional vehicles and go to any others. I will say under the Vision Zero or this this safety goal of zero fatalities by 2050, that's zero fatalities across the board. That's bikes, pedestrian, serious, and those types of fatalities, as well as fatalities caused that involve a motor vehicle. That's generally the Vision Zero sense. I don't want to go down the path of over explaining this, but generally it's anything within the transportation system, whether it's bus related, vehicle related, bike and pedestrian related, zero fatalities. That's the aspirational goal.
Great. So it's an overall of all vehicles. That's it. Thank you very much, Mike.
Involving the transportation system.
Correct.
Caveat on it.
All right, Seth Engelberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a preference for either of the two formats, but I'm wondering if this is the opportunity or if there'll be a different opportunity to discuss some of the goals, because these are good, but there are some things that I think need to be added to this as well.
Mike?
Madam Chair, I'd say this is the absolute opportunity to do that. We need to wrap this up next month. So this will be kind of the time to kind of flesh out ideas and hear what the rest of the commentary is on whether there's support for those, and that'll help out the vote for next month.
Great. Seth, if you want to go ahead with your comments, but first, are you working on the first framework or the second framework when you're making the comments?
It doesn't matter. The comments are general. I think they're new to either framework. So I have two things that I would think should be goals of this vision. The first is, so we talked like a little bit about, the sidewalks and multi-use paths and all, but there's nothing specifically called out improving. And we talk about limiting vehicles, but there's nothing specifically called out improving micromobility or pedestrian or bicycle transportation. I think that needs to be in here somewhere. And I have another one, but if there's comments on that or discussion, we can stay on that for now.
Wendy?
I was just at the Retailers Association of Massachusetts board meeting last week, and we had a presentation from National Grid, and there was a great deal of discussion of electric, of going carbon. How do they phrase it? By 2050 being decarbonized, and so electric charging stations, just like we were all just looking at each other kind of in the same way, like a zero fatality. It just sounds so aspirational, but yet you got to work toward it. And it just the mountain, the heavy lift that's involved in this decarbonization project around vehicles it's massive. And I'm just not sure if we're stressing it enough here, the electric charging opportunities.
And that would be not just for cars, but also, as Seth was pointing out, all the other electric options.
Everything, exactly.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, please, Seth.
So that's actually my second point. I think we need to put in here some goals related to climate change and resiliency. So whether that's like opting for total decarbonization or trying to, change a certain percentage, or if it's just general. And we have things in here about like minimizing impact to natural environment, but we really need to go further and add a commitment and a goal to prioritize non-carbon transportation systems, or if not everything could be non-carbon, but it's a gradient of moving towards less energy intensive or less carbon intensive transportation. Absolutely needs to be in this plan, in my opinion.
Thank you, Seth. Nat, you also have a comment?
Yeah, just a couple things. Actually, Seth said something at the beginning there that I kind of wanted to bring up. Mike, so the car limit thing is, that's an older vote back in 2019. I think we kind of included that a little bit, but I think that we're going to need to have more discussion on that issue. Renting your house is hard enough to get agreement on. Limiting cars is going to be a really, really tough battle. Okay, I think you know that, especially today with all the emphasis on everybody having their shake at things. So one of the things that got brought up to me, I think Mary even brought it up, but someone else said it to me too. I think it was Dawn. The whole width of the bike pass and this whole e-bike conversation, Mike, this is like a brand new thing that just popped up in the last couple of years that's really hitting us square in the eye right now. And I'm not sure where we're gonna, what impact we're gonna be able to have in the short term, but I think the conversation about widening certain bike paths when there's work being done on those paths, whether they're redone with cracks and so forth, and the idea of having a second path on the Milestone Road was, that's what was mentioned to me. And I actually thought it was kind of crazy until now. I don't think it's crazy. I think it's actually brilliant. I just didn't think of that. There's such a big layout, and it's a way to keep the road narrow, even though I think it should be a couple of feet wider for other reasons, trucks on the edges of the pavement. That is a brilliant conversation to have. We have plenty of land. I'm sure there's funding for this and so forth because we have so much space there. And the other thing, Mike, that's not in this plan is roundabouts. I don't see anything in there about finally getting roundabouts back on the table in a more comprehensive, way to explain how they function and what is so good about them, and how good they are for Nantucket. If we could, get sort of reset that conversation, I think that's important. And that's it. I mean, I could talk about this for hours, so there's no point in that. I'm just saying some of this bike path stuff is going to have to get re-examined, Mike, in my thought, and road shoulders for accommodating these new modes of transportation. They're not going away. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Nat. Go to Dawn.
That was actually me that Nat was calling out on the idea for a second path on Milestone Road because the layout is so big. And can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I'm having all kinds of sound issues. I can't hear myself, but I feel like the safety with the e-bikes has become such a big thing, and wherever we have the ability to either put a separate lane on the bike path or on the road, or in the case of Milestone, that really services the majority of the big trucks on the island, maybe trying to do another path. And I don't know, I'd love to hear what Mike thinks about that possibility.
Thank you, Don. You have 2 logins active.
Yeah, it's because I can't hear on the computer screen.
Okay. Yeah, so just make sure you know. Mike, do you have a response for Don's question?
Can you ask that one more time? I got distracted for half a second and missed the question.
Yeah, no, just the idea of getting additional lanes that are more specific to like e-bikes, motorized devices that aren't cars, and the idea of an entirely independent path on Milestone Road since the layout is so big.
Yeah, and this would be in addition to the existing paths that are being.
I mean, would it make more sense to widen the existing or to do an entirely separate one for both aesthetic purposes, like on the opposite side of the road, or and to keep them really independent on the longest stretch on the island with that services so many, all of the massive trucks are pretty much coming out of Milestone.
Yeah. Interesting idea. I would say perhaps with shoulders maybe on Milestone Road, and that could be used for mopeds and whatnot to make it easier for passing. But yeah, that could be maybe not an initial lane, but just say a shoulder.
Yeah, I look at it as that we can't put a moped next to a baby stroller, and we can't put an e-bike next to a big truck. What we need are 3 different speed zones. We need the pedestrian zone. We need the, sort of the middle range, maybe it's around 10 to 15 miles an hour zone. And then on Milestone Road, because it is a 45 mile an hour speed limit, that's a third zone. Nat, is your hand still up or did you have an additional comment? Thank you. Further comments from commissioners, John?
I know years ago there was a plan that actually showed some possibilities, and one of it was across the road, and there was a path that led straight from Island Lumber all the way straight through until almost Sconset. So that was it was actually a discussion that we had in this with this board. So it's interesting that we would potentially use that. We were not discussing e-bikes and mopeds separately for that path. We're actually talking about that for another just a bike path, or there was actually even discussion with modes of transportation like a little trolley or something that was a direct run from there. Obviously these were just discussions, but it's interesting that maybe there could be a dedicated lane for all these vehicles that are obviously above walking and normal just pedal bikes, and then obviously less than cars and trucks. So and the only concern would be that you always have something that doesn't go well, and you have regular bikes and people jogging on that, and then you'll have road bikes on that because they do go at a higher speed. It would just have to be obviously something that would be considered as far as labeling things and make sure that it's for that designated type of use in the middle with those vehicles, those motorized vehicles. So it's interesting for discussion, but I think it does have merit. One of the things that we'd have to obviously look at is one of the 9 goals in environmental and historic sensitivity. How do we minimally impact the natural environment of it? So if we were going to do that across the road, we don't want to make it look like a big runway with 3 lanes, the original bike path, the highway that we'll call Milestone, and then another road next to it that would really widen anything. So if we had the space, maybe we can integrate it inside of some trees and things like that, so it makes a separation. But it's a really good topic for discussion at a future point. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Barry?
Thank you. Just to follow up on what John said, through you to Mike. Hopefully you're there. Is there any positional thoughts coming in from DOT about the micromobility issues and how to address that in relation to other sidewalks and roadway systems? That's my first question to you.
Sure. Well, I think some of you might know that state law has recently changed. And again, Reish, I might ask you to help me out here if I lose my way a little bit. But there is new state law regarding e-bikes, and they've adopted a class system. The class 1 and 2 are pedal assist, and the class 2 has a throttle addition and makes it categorizes into a class 2. Those are limited at 20 miles an hour on speed.
Mm-hmm.
Bikes that can go faster than that, a class 3 as essentially unrestricted pedal assist. And although the throttle is still limited to 20 miles an hour, the pedal assist can go much faster. State law prohibits those class 3, those higher speed pedal assist from paths and sidewalks and soft surface paths as well. Class 1 and 2 are allowed to use the paths, but still are not allowed to use sidewalks. So that's how the state is treating those right now. So it's important that when we say e-bikes, it's almost I would almost say, well, what class of e-bike is it? The 20 mile an hour e-bikes, or is it the higher speed class 3 e-bikes? I think that's good clarification to make.
Yeah, I do think that needs to be out there a little bit more, and certainly in terms, excuse me, of roadway design and stuff. Even bike path design, I think we need to start incorporating that in. There was one more thing I had. I'm so sorry. Just where you're into the strengthen regional economic competitiveness.
Yes.
And I see one of the things here is disincentives to long-term on-street parking in core. That's great, but I'm going to challenge you at this point that we need to offer a viable alternative to that. You know, especially during the winter months when things are a little bit more quieter around here. I mean, the current downtown core allows that to take place until June 1st, I believe it is. But you know, if you're going to try to narrow down that time frame and provide disincentives, I think there needs to be some serious thought about what are you going to do to resolve that issue. In terms of that, I know one concept we floated around was Wilkes Square in a parking garage, for instance. But I'm gonna urge that some other creative methodologies be incorporated that would help to address that concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. That's actually a nice lead into my comment. When I look at transportation, I see a lot of the problems are actually behavioral issues rather than structural issues. And so, Mike, there's an opportunity here to include public outreach and education as a priority or as something that's fundable from a state or federal level?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
We try to do that, and like I mentioned with the UPWP discussion, the coordination with the communications director for the town, she's actually in the process now of putting together some public informational videos and asking for assistance from myself, the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and others to help inform what that messaging would be, and those public service announcements, I'll call them. So that's I guess how we would contribute there, and just lean on the town's communication staff and what we can provide, whether there's funding above and beyond that through a Mass DOT. I guess we can have those conversations, but generally, short answer, yes, we can do that.
Great. And my second observation regarding Milestone Road specifically, I want to let Gary know that we haven't forgotten that there are bus pullouts now on Milestone Road. And so any modification of the layout would need to accommodate that existing structure. I'd like the idea of a separate path, and that would also help by not trying to put a shoulder where we'd have somebody on a bike going 20 miles an hour as people are trying to get off a bus.
Very good.
Last comment, in our original 2019 vision, I liked that it was specific in calling out equitably and legally limit vehicles. I think we could probably take legally for granted because we're not going to be able to illegally limit vehicles. But just the new alternative wording, which just says with vehicle limitations, I worry about the public perception of that phrase. I realize we're trying to be more succinct, but I'm just not sure that saying it in this manner is going to be helpful. I don't know what other people think about that. John, we'll go to you. John, you're on mute.
Oh, I thought I unmuted. Thank you, Madam Chair. I may be a little late with this comment, but I was just thinking when you had said more, it's a behavioral issue with people. And I was also wondering, when we're looking at motorized vehicles, and we have to include, as Mike said, a certain class now of e-bikes. They're considered motorized, whether they're electric motors or they're gas motors, they are considered motors. And I just remember growing up as a kid, if you weren't able to drive a car, the first thing you were able to do is get a moped, a motorized vehicle, and you would have to register and get a license plate for it. I'm just wondering if we have all these bikes, and I know this was probably going to be an outcry for people that don't want to do it for half, and maybe half that would say yes, but what about permits and licensing for any kind of motorized bike that is not just pedal? what it might do is require responsibility, and now you're being held accountable because you actually have something, whether it's a small license on the back, but obviously you're registered, you have to be held accountable, and now there's a way to designate who you are if you're creating any kind of safety or traffic issue. So it's just a point as we get going forward with popular, e-bikes that are taking over not only the island, but a good portion of the, world now.
Thank you, John. Mike, is there anything that you wanted to respond to John on that?
Just to say that you should register your bike, whether it's electric or not, with the police department. It makes it easier to recover if it ever gets lost. And just know that with that class 3 of an e-bike, that those aren't considered to be bicycles under Mass General Law, at least to use the system of multi-use paths. Anyway, and just to clarify, the new state law that does require bikes to be labeled based on that class system, whether it's a 1, 2, or 3, and to label the bike with its maximum speed. As of January 1st of this year, that was required of all e-bikes. I'm not sure how good the rollout is, or if people know how to actually do that if they have one, or if manufacturers know that if they sell within Massachusetts, they need to have that designation. But that is the current law for e-bikes in the state.
Thank you, Mike. Maybe the police department could give out stickers with those speed limitations and class information.
Exactly. That might be the easiest way to do it.
Yeah. Joe Topham?
Thank you, Madam Chair. At BPAC, we had a discussion before Mike came back onto the scene, but we were talking about way of having, like, a $5 registration fee and then find out what the class of their bike was, and then some way, someone just brought up a license plate, but something I was thinking about was on the stem of the seat post, whether it's orange or yellow, whatever, so you can quickly tell, like, it belongs on the bike path or it doesn't. And then if it does, then I think that person should have a helmet, because at that speed, as Mike has said, once he gets over 20, 25 miles an hour, you're really kind of zipping along in traffic. So anything very quickly is going to happen right before you. So I really think that we should be kind of mindful of that. But that was something that we were working on. And now that Mike is back on the scene, we're going to bring that back up and really kind of address some way to bring that forward and really kind of control who's on the bike path, what's the speed, all these other things. But that is something that has been on our radar for a couple of months. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Joe. Go to Seth.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Joe, for your comments. And I think all this is really good discussion, and this is what I was hoping BPAC would take under their wing, because I do think there needs to be some type of regulation, licensing, safety guidelines, all of those things. If we're going to have safe, effective micro mobility transportation. And, I'm not on that committee, but I will come to your meetings and talk more there. But I think we might be getting a little bit too deep into it right here today.
Friday, Seth.
Thank you, Seth. Dave, you had your hand up. Did you want to add something?
With what Joe was saying, I think all these are great ideas. My concern is enforcing it, right? Like, we put all this energy in to set the system up, and if the police department doesn't want to take part in enforcement, it seems like it could be a big waste of time. Even though I think it should be done, I feel like the police department is not going to enforce it.
Thank you, Dave. So Mike, let me ask you, and I may be really reaching here. I don't see enforcement as a goal on these lists. Is it possible for to use this mechanism to hire additional enforcement resources?
I would say no, and that was almost by design, the enforcement element of this, because that's within the mission of the police department for enforcement. In the past, we've had wording of encourage enforcement as part of goals in other previous editions of the plan, and at least the pleasure of those previous boards was to kind of remove those, since it's something that should be inherent in the mission of that department. If there's things that we think should be enforced that currently aren't and require some kind of change, I think that's where we can get into maybe some objective or planning priority of pushing forward with a new rule or law or an ordinance to add. But for existing enforcement or to do more of something or something like this, I think it gets probably beyond what we're able to do.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Joe?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so I don't know how to go about this. I really think that, if you implement something and the police jump on it very quickly, then I think the word gets out and people then start to realize that they don't want to get a ticket. They're starting to get the rules wrote. And the other thing we were talking to BPAC was maybe doing informational videos that we could send out, rules of the bike path or etiquette like skiing, as you're coming up on someone, I'm on your right, left, whatever. But just a little education, I think, will go a long way to really kind of help, really get everyone to work together on these paths. That they're not that large and we really got to be careful of them. I know Mr. Bamber had a story to tell at town meeting, but I'm sure there's many of those going on. So anyway, we can kind of bring that in to educate people to, look out for the fellow person, or if you're coming up on someone, slow down to get around them and then, accelerate. But it really is something where we really need to educate people. And we're behind the curve on this, as Nat said, this is right between the eyes, and I think we need to get out of it sooner the better. So, but I don't want to go too deep into it, but that's what we're talking on PPAC.
Thank you, Joe. We'll go to Bert Johnson. Bert, you're muted.
Mike and I were talking about this issue, and perhaps like a little 3x5 sign or something at the beginning of the major bike paths with the rules of the road, sort of, for people to understand that it's just like the rules of the road. Bicycles, pedestrians should keep to the right, bicycles should announce themselves and stay to pass on the left. This is a common sense thing, but it seems like today common sense isn't so common anymore. And perhaps as part of the program, we could come up with some sort of a sign. Mike, I think, has seen them before, and we could imitate what someone else has already done and maybe help the problem a little bit.
Thank you, Bert. So Mike, let me ask you, the two different frameworks that you have, when I'm looking at them, they don't seem to have the same goals or priorities on them.
Mhm.
So are you looking primarily for a structural recommendation as to which framework we use, or are we looking at the individual items that are on each list?
I would say a little bit of both, and just note that the suggested goals that are on this screen, and then the goals that are on the option 2, they're worded a little bit differently, but I would say that both speak to safety and economics, and having an economical system, and call it sensitivity to the island or conserving, protecting resources. Those are pretty similar. What I'm projecting here under the option 1 does go above and beyond. It does list out goals such as reliability, which is a federal performance measure, equity, which is something that we need to address with a lot of our grants, and resiliency, contribute to a resilient system in a state of good repair. And state of good repair that reflects onto condition of the system, which again is a federal performance measure. So the equity, resilience, and conditions aren't necessarily in this option 2. Likewise, I'll note that the vehicle limitations in this option such as regulating the number of vehicles in the island, aren't necessarily within the option 4. So honestly, I wanted to get more of a feedback if you want your goals and priorities more aligned with your vision, which is typically the case. And as Risha said, that doesn't impact federal funding at all. Or if the option 1 of trying to adhere as closely as possible with federal performance measures and planning factors, whether that's a strategy that you would like to pursue. To me, it's almost 6 from a half dozen of the other, but it's whichever one that you think would be more helpful going forward, and especially explaining to the public. If you wanted my 2 cents, I would say that this option 2 does sync the vision, the goals, and the priorities much better than the other option, option 1. But option 1 does reflect onto the federal performance measures and factors better than this option 2.
So maybe I can use an example to explain why I'm confused. So
Mhm.
under economical, free fares to use public transportation on this screen. On the previous screen, under economic competitiveness, frequent transit operations year-round. So those are 2 completely different objectives. And I'm not sure if I'm supposed to pick one or the other, or if I can have both. And yeah, but you just asked me which framework, which labels to put on them.
I would say that when you measure economic competitiveness, which both of them are trying to do, they're both trying to talk about the economy of the region. Having an array of mode choices is something that's very conducive to improving the viability of a region, and the economic competitiveness of a region and the value of a region, offering those array of modes. Transit is one way of doing that. This one here says, frequent transit operations year round. It doesn't necessarily say free fare. The other option actually went into a little bit more detail. So I would say the spirit of more robust transit service would be within the same economics goal across both. Although they're worded a little bit differently, we can sync those better for next meeting, so that they're more apples to apples. But I would say this is trying to be apples to apples with just a little bit of nuance to each of those.
Yeah, I have to say, I have a very different reaction.
Okay.
I don't see these as related in a nuanced way. I see these as completely different choice sets. And I kind of like the wording of the suggested goals on the first one with the arrows, on the screen right now, as they're more active, they're more descriptive, as opposed to the other screen where they're just one word. Safety, well, of course, safety is a goal, but ensuring, what does it say here? Improves the bad choice. Let me look at accessibility, or ensure reliable travel. Well, I like ensure reliable travel as more specific, something that people can understand, whereas you're using the word accessibility, and is that for people with limited access? Is that for people who aren't served right now in their location? Accessibility is open to a lot of misinterpretation. So generally speaking, I like more descriptive language rather than just headers. But I'm concerned that I would be choosing priorities based on just the label and the goals, and that isn't my intent.
Okay. Fair comment. Thank you for that. And I would just note that if it's a little confusing here as a goal, accessibility, if that's a little confusing here as a goal, then it might be a little confusing within the vision as well. And like, what does that mean, accessibility? So maybe something to go back and just revisit that word in the vision statement as well. Hopefully within the whole framework of the flow from the vision to the goal to the priority of what accessibility means.
Yeah, I agree with you that linking the different phrasing is important.
Hmm.
Okay.
Other comments from commissioners on this item?
Just, Mary, can I I'm sorry, I didn't put my hand up. Madam Chair, I'm sorry about that.
Sorry if I missed you.
Can I just make a quick, Mike, I think I can kind of help you with this a little. We roll back maybe 10 years or so. When we were talking about the Orange Street stuff, the railroad bed and all that. Instead of accessibility, it was more like about connectivity, like getting from A to B. And when you started putting those Sharrow signs, no one ever heard of, that kind of stuff, the little bike arrow things and stuff. And I think that that's really kind of what that accessibility goal is. It's more about connectivity to the next spot. Like, I always say to people, no passing bikes until you get to East Creek Road, West Creek Road, because whatever, down towards the Island Home, because the road gets wide there. But to get to that is kind of complicated. And, at some point it's going to be better. But I think that that's what you're saying. And correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, in this sense, accessibility, and this almost comes down from, I've heard the state transportation secretary talk about this. Accessibility, all that really means is being able to get what you need, how you need to get there, get to where you need to be, how you want to get there. So that's goes into a lot of different things. Is it accessible? Does it accommodate all modes, all users, whether it's a wheelchair, bicycle, etc.? And is it connected? Are there gaps in the way that could stop you from being able to access what you need? So I think it's all kind of in the same spirit of options and accesses.
And you'll be proud, Mike, when you're over here, you'll see bikes banging a right at Valero's little road there, zipping down to the railroad bed, just like it was there for 50 years. It takes time for people to figure things out. So
mission accomplished.
Anyways,
Huh?
Yeah, that part.
All right, thank you, Nat. Any further comments on this item? We've given Mike a lot to chew on, and this will come back to us at the next meeting.
Very good. And just quickly, Madam Chair, just to go over the current conditions, this isn't, this is still very much a work in progress. This slide shows the types of facilities that are being discussed in the plan. Please note that the plan will have current conditions as well as challenges and opportunities for each of those facilities. The narrative of the sections is going to be drastically reduced, with the majority of the descriptions of each of the assets moved over into an appendix. For example, the aviation section will reflect the airport's master plan in the appendix. Active transportation section will reference the bike and pedestrian master plan in the appendix. Facilities that do not necessarily have a reference document for the appendix will have a note added that this section needs to be developed. And the goal is to get the report down to a very readable, perhaps a 40-page document rather than the current 200+ page document, again, with a wealth of appendices for reference. So just to I'm going to quickly fly through each of these. Like I said, each of these, this is still a work in progress. It's not well developed, so it's a little half-baked to share with you. But the roadways, focusing on the high traffic corridors in the plan, the public transportation system. Again, I'll have to coordinate with Gary Roberts on this section to describe the current system. Again, probably just ridership and number of routes, as well as some challenging opportunities that we know that exist. Under active transportation, this is, again, talking about the bike paths and the sidewalks and the bike lane system on the islands. Freight, we'll have a discussion of those items, which are mostly along the truck route, and with perhaps a little bit of a discussion of loading zones dealing with freight. Aviation, here's the number of employments each year. You can see in 2020, there was a dip, as you can probably imagine, and then a bounce back. But I'm coordinating with Noah Carberg at the airport on what he would like to see in this section for description of the current system, and then what his challenges and opportunities are over at the airport. And same with the ferry operations. Here's a chart of the ferry ridership for passengers through 2022. And I'll just note, Nat, I don't know if you want to expand on this, The Steamship Authority is doing a strategic planning update, and there are public meetings over the next week or two for that I've recently learned about, but I'll be liaising with Nat, Rob Brandy, and the Steamship Authority on those. Nat, did you want to offer anything else on this?
Just, yeah, this was part of some of the stuff that came out of the HMS report, Mike, from 2018, 2019. And it's actually somebody it's Julia Novak's group that's doing this. And we had a joint meeting last month, actually May 2nd, so almost last month. And it was good. I mean, a lot of good input, trying to keep the sort of from things from getting a little too out of hand with, things that are unreachable versus the things that people want. People want reliability. They want communication. They want to know that they can get on the boat. They want the reservation system improved. And a lot of that stuff is coming. So I think she got a good message from everyone, because you got to realize you got both islands, two completely opposite needs and desires and problems. So, but it's a good, program, Mike. And yeah, they're coming over here pretty soon for some meetings.
So I can fill that detail in. June 12th from 2 to 4 p.m. It's an in-person meeting, and I'm not sure. I think it's in the public safety building.
I don't know, Mary. I'm sorry. I should, but I don't. I can find that out.
Madam Chair, if it's helpful at all, I'll try to work with Florencia in the communications office to see if there's going to be any push out to the public to advertise those meetings here locally.
That would be helpful. Thank you, Mike.
Moving on to parking, again, a brief description of the current parking systems, challenges and opportunities, and landing on population and job forecasts. This is something we need to do as part of the updating of the plan. We need to understand what the current population is and what the forecasted populations are. MassDOT has partnered with the Boston region and the UMass Donahue Institute to update population projections for us. On this chart here, you can see that the blue line is what we had shown as a trend in the last planning cycle for the 2019 plan, and that the future projections here going out to 2040 are below what they are nowadays. And so what's shown in green is our new census number population, and then how that's projected to grow out to 2050. And just note for the next meeting that we'll expand a little bit more on this section of graphs for the presentation to see if there's any discussion on challenges and opportunities. Just to go into jobs, same discussion here. What's in blue is the last cycle's trend and projection for employment on the islands, and the green line is showing what the new trend lines are for employment in this area based on, again, what MassDOT has provided us from the Boston region, the UMass Donahue Institute. And here's just the split of industries that currently compared to statewide. You can see here that construction is, by far a big part of it, as well as leisure and hospitality, a big part of our economy and jobs here. So I'm just providing that here for informational purposes. And I will note that, as was done last time, and I have been in contact with the Nantucket data platform to see if this has been updated, but the effective population of the island is so critical to understand if we're trying to design for some seasonality, and that we have a 3-month season here where the population does seem like it quadruples basically over a few month period. So it's good to have that discussion in the plan, and I hope we can perhaps have updated information to include in this plan as well. Other areas that are discussed in the plan are the land use, and those are being updated as well. I don't have a lot of breakdown of that just yet, but I will for next meeting. And I'll note that project selection, how we score projects and evaluate them. I'll have a little bit of discussion there. next month on this, and that'll probably be in subsequent meetings, like in meeting number 4. We'll probably go into more of a deep dive when we try to come up with an action plan and prioritization. Look at this particular table and show and discuss the criteria we're using to evaluate projects and the different scoring factors that we're using for each project. And just as a reminder, next meeting is June 26th to review the survey results. If you haven't already done so, please take the survey if you haven't, and encourage others to participate as well in the survey. We're doing very well in our response rate. I'll just note that we've already beat what we've done last cycle, and we've, have ambitions of what we want to achieve. 1,000 response rate. Might not get there, but we'd like to hit 1,000 responses for this survey cycle. And note that at the next month meeting, we do need to finalize the goals and the vision for this plan, as well as we'll start continuing the discussion of conditions and priorities, which will be over the next couple of meetings. So with that, Madam Chair,